it's a honor to have you as an interviewee, and I would like to ask you a few questions. First of all, according to the developmental model of intercultural sensitivity, what do you think is the role of the social class into perceiving the transition to another culture?
Well, the developmental model of intercultural sensitivity is set up to model how complexly you can perceive another situation, and it's much like being like a wine connoisseur. If you can either approach wine in the simple way and it's a red or white, or you can approach it in a complex way with all kinds of body and finish and so forth. And similarly, we can approach cross-cultural situations either fairly simplistically, us and them, or in a far more complex way, which is these are other people who are complex as we are but different, and we need to be figuring out how to negotiate meaning across these two areas. I think social class comes in probably as an indicator of education level. That at least in our societies these days, the ability to bring complex categories to bear in your perception on others is a function of education. And we know extremely well that education and social class are correlated very, very highly, unfortunately. So if we are concerned about the issue of social class in cross-cultural contact, I would say it's virtually entirely a function of education, particularly that education that's associated with critical thinking and the ability to generate complex categories.
I understand. Now, I would like to ask what was the purpose of integrating terms from physics like quantum paradigm or Einstein paradigm? What was the target or the goal?
Well, the goal of using the idea of paradigms, Thomas Kuhn's idea of paradigms, was pretty much the same idea that he had in physics, which is that science is not a kind of linear accretion of knowledge, when building one knowledge on another, leading to some, final state of perfect knowledge, I assume. But rather, he said that science moves through paradigms, and it moves through understanding the world in one way and in elaborating that as much as possible, but then realizing that there are limitations and shifting to another way of understanding the world, thus the Newtonian, the Einsteinian, the quantum paradigms. The point I was making in the presentation was that these paradigms translate into social science. The social science, of course, was begun as an attempt to be scientific, but be scientific in pretty much of the natural science way. So Comte, for instance, the father of sociology, is bringing Newtonian physics, linear causality, mechanistic thinking, the idea of predictability to social events, and saying we can understand social events in these Newtonian physics ways. Okay. And so similarly, when the paradigm changed to a more Einsteinian paradigm in physics, we saw, I think, with some lag, more popularity in the social sciences with the idea of perspective and context. And this was the time when the very idea of culture and cultural context was elaborated. It's not that relativity didn't exist before. It's just that it was not seen as an organizer of social science activity as much. Now I'm suggesting that there is both a need for and also some impetus towards moving into this constructivist, what I'm calling a constructivist paradigm, which I think is a good term for the more quantum mechanics paradigm that's now currently existing in physics. As that moves into social science, I think we can call it a constructivist paradigm. And the implications for social science, for cross-cultural psychology particularly, are that it makes us as observers more responsible for the questions we're asking. that rather than assuming that we are dealing with some absolute pre-existing reality, we are assuming that we're in some co-ontogenic relationship with phenomena, then that what we see is, at least to some extent, a function of how we're looking at it, and that we need to be more attentive to that in the way we're doing research.
And what do you think that media would play a role in promoting one of these paradigms? Like, if were media to play a role, which should be?
That's a very interesting question, because media right now is in the process of moving from a more objective, the objective news, to a clearly more relativist position, where media are saying, we have our perspective, you have your perspective, we're proud of our perspective, we will organize facts in our way, you organize facts in your way. And so this is moving into almost an extreme form of relativism in media. As such, media right now, to state it generally, are contributing to the inappropriate applications of relativism. I mean, one implication of relativism is we can't know anything because you have your opinion and I have my opinion. You have your perspective, I have my perspective, so whatever. And right now I think media is contributed in many ways to that kind of whatever position, which is not useful for anybody. Media could be part of a movement towards a more constructivist view, not by giving up their perspective, but by calling attention to their perspective and saying, we are selecting data in such and such a way according to such and such a set of principles, which allows us to describe things in this way, and here's how we're going to be describing things. In other words, they don't make this specious claim that they're describing reality, which is completely different than the reality that the other group is describing. Rather, they say, they take responsibility for organizing their perception differently. Some of the media are doing that. The more responsible media are, I think, calling attention to their own assumptive base. And I think that also we as researchers need to be doing that better to contribute to this more positive movement towards constructivism.
You were mentioning about responsible media. Do you think in future will this responsible media be a majority, or this thing is not wanted actually?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. The people who don't want media like that, the people who don't want responsible media, as we just described, are the people who are manipulating the process. No, I mean, you know who those people are, and if you're manipulating the process, then it serves you to have this extreme relativism in which you have your reality and I have my reality, and if I have more power than you do, or if I have more money to buy more media than you do, then I can impose more or less my reality on you. Or if I'm somehow more popular in social media, I have more followers, I have more likes, then that gives me more power in this media context. And those people who are trying to manipulate events in that way, they want the media to stay in this relativistic position. But for those people who would like for us to move towards a more conscious consensus about how it is that we're going to live together, I think that they would say media moving towards taking responsibility for their perspective would be a good thing.
Okay, thank you so much for the interview.
Thank you. Thanks.